Agents don't always understand rent to rent. They filter your messages to landlords, they hit you with all this red tape, and they kill your confidence before you even get your first deal when they're not the ones that own the property. In this video, I'm breaking down why you should actually avoid letting agents and what you should do instead. This is the exact approach my mentees use to bypass the agents and get straight to the source, securing deals faster, with fewer objections, and of course, more cash flow. So if you've been struggling with letting agents, maybe you've just been looking in the wrong direction, and this video is going to be a game changer. Look, this is controversial, but the fact of the matter is letting agents, all right, are a really challenging way to get rent-to-rent deals. And when I speak to a lot of you and you're starting out, the first thing you do is you go on Rightmove or you pop into town and you look for deals through letting agents. And I did this myself when I started. And it wasn't until I was getting no after no after no, I realized what I'm going to show you now. And it changed everything. You see, the fact of the matter is, whether you like it or not, this big majority of letting agents, they do not like rent to rent. They see us as competition. They like to control the process fully. They like to make sure their landlords only deal with them. And to be quite honest with you, rent to rent supersedes the service of a letting agent. So they see us as a threat. So this means that, 70% of agents, you're just going to get a absolute no. You're only going to get a very small percentage, about 10% of agents that are just like, yeah, we do company lets. Yes, we love it. We've had a great experience. We are in. And then you've got this section here who are kind of like maybes. These are like, if your pitch is strong, if you've got the credibility, you may be able to turn these into a yes, but a lot of the time these will slide into no's. And when I realized this, I was like, hang on a minute. If I'm calling 10 agents and only one of them's on board, this means two things. It's really bad for my confidence because I just keep getting rejected. But the second thing is it's just not that effective. Now, whilst you only need one agent or two agents on site to really scale, there's so many other ways that I personally think, at the beginning at least, forget about agents and you want to go direct to the source. Now, let's say you're very lucky and you drop on that one agent out of 10, that 10% of agents. And let's say you manage to have a potential property deal. Okay, so this is the deal right here. And let's use green. Okay, this is you. All right, do an arrow like that. And then what, of course, happens is your agent, okay, your agent is here. Okay, representing that property. But this is the part which really starts to get painful, is the landlord is way over there. So as you can see, I call this the middleman problem. What tends to happen is, because you've got you, then the deal, then the agent, then the landlord, rather than you being direct to the landlord, you've now got lots of different people and factors involved in this one property deal. And a common thing that I see a lot at the beginning is you will love the deal, you'll communicate with the agent, and the agent will say, yep, I will run it by the landlord. I will see if this is something the landlord would find of interest. And what happens? Crickets. You never ever hear from them again. And I hate to sound cynical, but I always wonder, did they even have that conversation with the landlord? But this isn't just an issue in terms of the initial sourcing. It becomes very problematic when it comes to the negotiation, because you have to agree on the rent and the term and stuff with the agent, and then you have to go to the landlord and then get approval when it comes back. This also happens in the contract phase when you start looking at all the different clauses, start dates, end dates, length of term, whether you're paying deposits, rent-free period. All these different factors mean you've got issues in the sourcing. And then a lot of you may not know this, but if you sign a deal with an agent, what tends to happen? A lot of people say, do you have to pay the agent? No, because in this scenario, we are just basically a tenant. Please tell me tenant is two N's.
How do you spell tenant? T-E-N-A-N-T. Tenant.
If not, I apologize, guys. But check it out. What tends to happen is we're just the tenant. So what's going to happen is when you sign the deal with the agent, the landlord is just going to take the rent and take their 10% before paying the landlord, right? So the agent still gets paid. Okay, you don't have to pay the landlord. No. What happens is you pay the agent takes their 10% just like you would with a normal tenant, and then the landlord gets paid. That's how the flow works. But once you've got the deal, and let's say the boiler goes, or let's say there's an electrical issue. Okay, there's an electric issue and it needs solving. The same issue happens. You've got guests checking in. Okay, you've got an Airbnb booking. Absolute nightmare. You've got guests checking in today. The boiler's broken. You can't just deal with the landlord. You've got to go to the agent. The agent's then got to go to the landlord. The landlord's got to approve it. Then it goes to the agent. Then you've got to wait for the agent. So it can be really problematic when you're in the flow of the deal too. Next big issue you're going to find, and this is so underrated. Let's say you are doing a property deal, and I'm just going to use quick maths. Let's say the rent on this deal is £1,000, but you have to pay the agent. I say you, the landlord has to pay the agent. So what this means is if the agent gets 10%, the net rent, okay, this means after the agency fees, the landlord actually gets is 1,000 minus 10%. They only actually get £900, correct? All right. So what happens is, I honestly, when I realized this, I just started getting way better deals at work, just working way better. Is if you actually cut out the agent, you can therefore save yourself that 10%, because I can go direct to the landlord and now I can offer 900, or what's even more powerful, I can offer them 950, and then we save 5%. Okay, we save 5%, and the landlord gets more. They get 5% more with us than they would if they were otherwise with a letting agent. So, in other words, you're way more likely to get more competitive rents when you go direct to the landlord and you remove the letting agent. In Rent-to-Rent 2.0, it's all about saving money. So on average, when I work with mentees, I save them around £5,000 per deal. And the way I do that is in three different ways. Way number one is we never, ever pay a deposit. Okay, so if the rent's £2,000, the landlord may normally want £2,500 deposit. The problem with that is over 10, 20 deals, it significantly increases your outlay. The second way we love to do it is we always want to secure a rent-free period. Okay, and then the third thing is we also want to make sure that even though our contract with the landlord is for 5 years, okay, we get what's called a 2-month termination clause, where if it's not working for us for any reason, we can break out. Now, the problem with letting agents is, what do they always want? Well, they always want a deposit, right? I don't blame them. They always want a deposit because they've got to provide security to their landlord. They never want a rent-free period. Why? Because they want their rent from day one and also need to cover their landlord. And then the third thing is they never, ever want to honor any termination clause. So a 5-year deal would be 5 years. So the problem with this, by the way, is if you take on a property and for whatever reason it doesn't work, or you decide in 3 years' time, change of direction, you don't want to do this, you're now on the hook for rent for 5 years. So I personally find the contracts and these favorable Rent-to-Rent 2.0 terms are pretty hard with letting agents. So I'd much rather go direct to the landlord, all right, where I can pay less rent, I can get all the terms I want. It's a safer, way better deal, right? Look, when I started, I did 20 deals in my first year, and I did start to implement letting agents, but it's a bit of a slower game. But this is often overlooked, and to be quite frank, I think it's overlooked because not a lot of people scale to the level that I scaled. Now, listen, letting agents, this is kind of the phase that I went through. So at the beginning, I went through a phase where letting agents, okay, they just didn't like me, okay? It was a real struggle with letting agents. Then it got to a certain point where they realized I could make their life really easy. So what happened is they started giving me loads of deals. I was getting maybe a deal a month off a couple of different letting agents when I really built my credibility. But here is the thing that's not spoken about. As soon as I started having a presence, okay, I had branded cars, branded flyers, branded letting boards. I had a big presence in the city, and we was really building momentum. What I found is the agents, they felt threatened and they wanted to stop working with me. So personally, I find letting agents can be good in this sort of middle section. I'm talking about maybe 5 to 15, 5 to 20 deals. But then once you get to 20 deals plus, they're not going to want to give you their properties anymore, because the fact of the matter is very rarely did a landlord come to me and then go back to the agent at the beginning. And now I never work with agents just because we've scaled to such a level, it just doesn't make sense for either party. So if you are serious about scaling your rent-to-rent business to multi 6, 7 figures and beyond, just understand that long-term, you need to get direct to the source. That's where the real scale is. That's where the real profits are. That's where your easy life is. And I promise you, you will not regret taking this advice. If you got value from this video and you want to steal the exact script I and my mentees use to source over 1,000 property deals, hit the link.